Welcome to Advent of Tessellations 2024. My name is Madonna Yoder, and you're joining hundreds of folders around the world on this 25-day journey into the infinite world of repeating patterns folded from a single sheet of paper. You'll discover many different twists in this challenge, building up to advanced patterns with hybrid hexagon twists. On day 15 of Advent of Tess, we are folding Andromeda, which, just a warning from the start, this has the most twists on it of any of the patterns we're doing together in Advent of Tess. There are 49 different twists on 24 grid divisions. That's 8 distinct positions that happen 6 times and 1 in the center. So if you don't like triangle wraps and compound wraps, this might be one to skip for a while. But if you do want to go ahead and fold, we're using 24 grid divisions on a hexagon, and you can get a tutorial on that and also the crease pattern for today's tutorial when you sign up for email reminders at training.gatheringfolds.com/advent. And we're going to start with a closed hexagon twist in the center. I'll go ahead and put an A in the center, although these sides are going to be very distinct. And we're going to have, since it's a closed twist, the mountain folds are going to come out to the corners of the paper, and the valley folds are going to be one spacing above on the right-hand side, because this is a right-handed closed hexagon twist. And I'll pass that completed pleat off to my left hand while I set up the next pleat, passing that off, setting up the next pleat, and pass, and next, and pass. And don't worry, I don't expect you to be doing this as fast as I am. But one thing that's really helping this move quickly and not devolve into chasing pleats, chasing the same pleat over and over and over again, is I'm keeping most of my paper down on the table and just letting a little bit in the center come up. And I can bring even a little bit more down onto the table until I have just 2 grid spacings left, going up into the air, and then zooming in so we can see all the details. I'm going to press gently on top and grab and squeeze slightly as I twist around. It's a sudden twist, and this doesn't look great at first, but then I go in and basically I'm pulling apart any areas that look conflicted until the folds snap back onto the grid lines and I'm good to go. I can double check that all of my folds are done precisely by looking at the back. If there's things that look crumpled, then I can lift up a fold and use my bone folder to smooth it out. So that is our central twist. And right away with the next twist, we're going to start with some high density. I'm going to flip the paper over to the B side. I'm not going to write a B though, because anywhere I write it is going to get disrupted. We're going to have open triangle twists at as close of a spacing as possible. So our new valley fold is going to be right along the existing mountain fold. And our new mountain is going to be one spacing out from that. We're making an open triangle twist, so we're going to have our 3rd grid direction going out. Our first was coming from the central hexagon. So setting up our pleat that's going out to the right, that's going to lay on top of the existing pleat. I'm going to erase the extension of the pleat from the hexagon, all parts of it that go past my new mountain fold, and solidify both the mountain and the valley for that third pleat. And with those in place, I'm mostly pressing on these two corners, just outside of those two corners, because the central corner is right at that closed hexagon hole. And then we can press to squash. Now my next triangle, I'm going to be very specific about where I'm going to put it. It looks right now like the next pleat from the hexagon is this one, but that's because we hid a pleat. So I want to make sure that my next triangle is on this hidden pleat, where it's going to have its new mountains in those locations. So we're keeping the valley as close in as possible, folding over our existing pleat. So this is an existing pleat in there. We're folding right on top of it. And then when I lift up, the mountain for the next, for the third direction is going to go right under the corner of the existing triangle. We're going to leave the pleat from the existing triangle fully folded. So that pleat is going to stay fully folded, and we're going to create a pleat overlap as we pass through. So now these two corners are very stably in position, and I'm mostly pressing outside of the third corner to start the squash, and then spreading out in there. I'm going to continue around in the same order, so I need to remember to untuck my pleat from underneath. I'm going to fold over directly on top of the existing pleat, then find the third grid direction, and this new pleat is going to go right under the corner of the previous triangle twist, and the pleat from the previous triangle is going to stay fully folded while I pass my new pleat through. Pass those stable corners to my left hand and press to squash. So far, so good. We're going to work all our way around, and I'm going to do the next two a little bit faster and then slow down when I get to the sixth one. So I'm going to untuck the pleat from underneath, fold directly on top of the existing pleat, erase the extension of the pleat from the hexagon, finding the third pleat around my open triangle, and squash. And rotate, untuck the pleat from under my latest triangle, fold a new pleat directly on top of the existing pleat, and fold my third pleat with the mountain passing right under the corner of the previous triangle. One interesting thing to notice if you've squashed your triangles precisely is that you can see this region of grid. You can see continuity in the grid lines within that region, but it doesn't continue outside of that region. So maybe with a little different lighting, it's easier to see. But that's just a mathematical curiosity and a way to check that your squashing is precise. So with the last pleat, I'm going to untuck it from under the previous triangle. And then I'm going to say, well, I don't actually want to do pleat overlaps on both ends. On this end, connecting to the first triangle, I actually want to do a compound wrap. So I'm going to have the valley for this new twist coming straight from the center out to one space away from the corner of the first triangle. And I'm going to have a mountain one space further away than that. I'll open this bottom pleat. So I actually have 3 parallel pleats here. Just one of them is tucked underneath. Opening this bottom pleat, I'm going to pop the mountain down where my valley is hitting. I'm going to let that valley bounce. It's going to hit the valley below and it's going to bounce out. The other thing I need is that this point comes back up as a 3-way intersection of mountains. So I'm letting that come up while keeping the rest of my mountains also lifted up. And with that in place, I can get this most of the way flat, but like we saw in yesterday's pattern, it can't go fully flat until we get the 3rd pleat around our new triangle, and that one is going to overlap like normal under the corner of the neighboring triangle. And then we can squash our new open triangle twist, completing this wheel structure. So there's a couple different things that you could fold starting from this structure, one of which has been taught in Advent of Tessellations before, if you were to resolve this with rhombus twists. But today we're doing something different, and not just by making them hexagons, but the connections of the pleats between these hexagons we're going to put around the outside are not going to be triangles. That is what makes this pattern strange and interesting. So I'm going to grab specifically the compound wrap. So not the pleat overlaps, but the compound wrap. I'm going to grab that compound wrap and flip over to the opposite side of the paper. And you'll notice as you look around, there's just a little bit more space in here than there is anywhere else. And that's because of the compound wrap. So right here under the compound wrap is where I want to start again. And I'm going to be putting in, so here's another thing. I could put in closed hexagon twists and do a an open triangle flagstone pattern, but that's not what we're doing with this particular pattern. We're doing open hexagon twists, and because of the order that I folded this pleat overlap, so notice it's easy to open on this side of the paper. And actually, I'm going to show you from references relative to other folds instead of references relative to the pleat overlap, because it is possible that it was folded in a different way on your paper. So I don't want to rely on that too heavily. The key reference that I want moving forward is after I open up this triangle wrap, my next pleat heading down around the center is going to be 2 spaces away from the parallel pleat bounding the triangle. So if I set that up, coming up in here, I can start seeing, oh, there's a pointy triangle. There's a pointy triangle. I'm going to have these pointy triangles all the way around my puffy hexagon star. And it's the kind of thing where the first couple times you fold these open hexagons, it's not going to jump out at you that these are the pointy triangles around the puffy hexagon star. But once you've been folding more and more of them, that is going to be like a bit of x-ray vision that gets added to your brain. On this top end, if I want my next pleat to add to the puffy hexagon star, this is going to make a tube with the compound wrap. Notice compound wrap. And then we can add in another fold that's at tube pleat spacing and another fold that's headed out to the edge. These are all adding to our hexagon, and I want to make it very clear that the tube pleat spacing here and here is entirely due to us working beside the compound wrap. So if we were working on any other intersection, that wouldn't quite be the case. We would have more things overlapping other things. But since we're here, since we have this hexagon, we can go ahead and press to squash. And now another reference that I have for you is that between these hexagons is going to be tube pleat spacing, not just in this direction, but also in this direction. So my next valley fold is going to be one spacing away from this folded mountain, which means that my next mountain fold is a space away from that. And these two pleats are coming together at 120 degrees. So this is going to be a standard triangle wrap. Opening up here, I'm going to pop the valley down. It's going to continue straight until it hits the next valley, and then it will bounce out to the edge of the paper, and my mountains will follow one grid spacing away. So I can get that locked in place even before I open up my pleat overlap. And then I remember I also have this reference of tube pleat spacing going down below. So not only do I have the two pleats coming together from the triangle twists, but I also have this reference point of tube pleat spacing on either side that allows me to find more points of my puffy hexagon star. And another reference is that I'm going to have an accordion pleat. So valley, one grid spacing mountain, one grid spacing valley, one grid spacing mountain, stacked on top of each other between the wrapped pleat and my next pleat around the hexagon. And I can squash that triangle now, or sorry, that hexagon, and then rotate and repeat. So I'm going to have that tube pleat spacing where my valley is one space away from the folded mountain, which means that this mountain gets interrupted by letting the valley pass through two spaces from the corner of the hexagon. And then I'm going to have a mountain following one space away from that valley and wrap around and lock in place. I already saw with the previous hexagon that I'm going to have an accordion on top of that. I do at some point need to dig out this tension with the pleat overlap and run another pleat down around the center at tube pleat spacing, and then find my final pleat to complete the puffy hexagon star. If you're not familiar with these puffy hexagon stars, these open hexagon twists, definitely check out some of the earlier days of Advent of Tess this year. I also have videos on all of the twists that we're using in more specific tutorials in my YouTube channel. And also in other courses. So continuing onwards, if I do it without drawing at all, I want to go 2 spaces from the corner of the existing hexagon to pop down, running my valley from the open triangle hole past the mountain 1 grid spacing and bouncing to form a triangle wrap. I noticed from the last hexagon that it was actually easier to open the overlap here, or at this stage rather, and run that new pleat down around the center, and then find my 2 remaining pleats for that open hexagon twist and pressed squash. And rotate and repeat once more. This is moving quite a bit faster on this one, just so we can get through. And notice I've got this tube pleat spacing, but I'm coming into that compound wrap, and that's going to be extra crunchy down there. But we don't have to really emphasize it, as long as the area close to the twist is flat. Like this whole area down here can kind of be left a little more 3D. As long as this area is very firm and stable, I can squash. And then I need 1 more hexagon here. This is a compound wrap, so I need to be extra careful that I'm putting things in the right place. I can start with that same wrap that I've been doing. So my valley fold passing through here, interrupting this mountain 2 spaces from the corner of the hexagon, popping down, and I've got that mountain following the valley 1 grid spacing away. You'll notice this is less happy now than it was before, because I need to open up that pleat overlap, pop up that corner from inside the compound wrap, and now I can reinstate this pleat from my first open hexagon, and I'm going to have a new pleat. So this would be my 2 grid spacings reference, like normal. It's coming under an existing pleat that we can erase back to wrap around. And this is creating that familiar accordion that we see on all the rest of our open hexagon twists too. And with that set up, we can find our 2 remaining pleats and squash. So far, so good. And it's time to flip over. I guess the B side is stable now. I can put a B on it. And we have these triangle wraps. Now these triangle wraps, or 3-way intersections on this side, are going to turn into closed rhombus twists. So instead of folding triangles here, we're going hexagon, triangle, hexagon, and it goes to triangle looping back to the initial hexagon. But out here, we've got hexagon, triangle, hexagon, rhombus. So that is going to put us in a different tiling, a different way of repeating the pattern. Flipping back to the B side, that rhombus is going to have its central diamond. So this is a closed rhombus twist. It's going to have that central diamond sitting right in the pocket of the three-way intersection, and it's going to throw a pleat back that way. So how I had it originally pinched, this is a broomstick arrangement where you have 3 pleats next to each other in these 3 directions and 1 out the other way. We do not want a broomstick arrangement, we want an X. And so this pleat is going to come back this way, and we could fold straight through, or we can set up the next triangle and a triangle wrap. So folding straight through is not a massive deal in this pattern, because with the open hexagon twist, even though we would be folding through a corner of it, the grid line on the inside is the same as the grid line on the outside, so it's not a huge deal. But what I would rather do is pop down the corner, or sorry, to pop down this point 1 space out from the future fat corner of the rhombus, and have a valley fold come over from under the future skinny corner of the rhombus. That's popping down. And then we can set up a 3-way intersection of mountains above and a 3-way intersection of valleys below that can take care of all of these pleats without running through existing twists. So again, from the triangle wrap, I found the through line that's running straight through from the bottom pleat of the triangle wrap through the middle, through the central diamond. I switched the direction of the free pleat to match this X shape instead of a broomstick shape. And then 1 spacing from the corner of the central diamond, I popped that down. And this is where the wrap mania is really getting started. So I'm going to have a valley in here, parallel to this mountain of my diagonal pleat. And then in order to sustain that 3-way intersection of valleys, I'm going to need a 3-way intersection of mountains, 1 grid spacing away. And since I don't want to run this mountain out, that's going to combine with the existing mountain there to create a second 3-way intersection of mountains up above. So actually getting all of this into place, we've got our rhombus in here, triangle up above. I'm going to squash 1 and then immediately squash the other. I could have chosen to lay that triangle down a little for a little while, but it would have gotten a bit in the way. And basically, as we work our way around, we're going to be putting in these rhombi and then, for the most part, solving our problems with triangles. That's the theme. So next up, we have two places where we could work next. The first is this triangle wrap that we already did, and the second is we actually have a pleat overlap here at the tip of the rhombus. So what I'm going to do is resolve this overlap first, which will give me another triangle on this side and another triangle wrap, and then I'll flip over to squash both of those triangles. So in order to resolve this pleat overlap, I'm going to start by opening and opening enough that I'm emphasizing, and I'm going to push it down so I can draw on it. Okay. I'm opening enough to emphasize this grid line running under the rhombus that's one grid spacing away from the existing mountain fold going to the fat corner of the rhombus. Notice I did not open everything. And the next thing I'm going to do is use that new mountain and the existing mountain that's already there to create a three-way intersection of mountains, which means erasing this mountain that was previously there. And you'll notice I didn't spread that erasure all the way out to the edge. I just dropped it down one grid spacing from that three-way intersection. And that is kind of naturally creating a three-way intersection of valleys under here. It may or may not be for your paper, and that's okay. And then the one remaining thing is we want to let this valley continue out to the edge, and it needs a mountain to go next to it. Eventually, when it's squashed, it'll be this mountain coming under. But for right now, that needs to be this mountain coming directly out of the tip of the rhombus. Now notice that's not the same grid line as the through line. And we can let that settle in place and squash our new triangle above with its corner coming exactly to the corner of the rhombus. And then flip over, and now we have two triangle wraps. I'm going to take this one on top first and flip the free pleat to squash, and then take the next one, flip the free pleat and squash. Okay, so that's kind of intense. We're not quite through the starting, the edge sequence. We haven't gotten around a corner yet. So it's time to tackle a corner. And when I'm looking at which way to go around here, the main thing I'm looking for is, okay, if I take this set of parallel plates and start at this end, can I get folds that are going through existing twists? And in this direction, the answer is no. If I'm starting out here, it's going away from things. If I'm starting here and folding plates that go this way, well, that's immediately impacting other twists. So I'm going to want to go up and around. And the interesting thing with this particular pattern, so the last 2 days, we've been substituting some closed triangles for closed rhombi. In this pattern, we're going to substitute a closed rhombus for a copy of another open triangle or open hexagon. So we could, if we had more grid, repeat this pattern with this twist coming immediately after this twist. So it would be hexagon, then immediately next hexagon, then feeding into a repeat of the center. But for today's purposes, we're going to fold that as a closed rhombus instead. So right now, I've got a triangle twist folded under here. So that's this pleat. I've got pleat coming directly from the hexagon. And my next pleat is part of the triangle wrap. So the trick right now is going to be to get that rhombus in place and get a triangle wrap under there without disturbing this triangle wrap. It's very dense spacing, kind of flagstone techniques. And I'm going to have a valley coming from the closed triangle hole out to one spacing out from the hexagon corner. I'm going to pop that down, and keeping the bottom pleat folded, I'm going to set up a triangle wrap. So keeping this bottom pleat folded, I'm just pretending that that's one single bit of paper, no folds there. Pretending, but there are folds, they're just staying together. And I'm putting in my three-way intersection of valleys with my three-way intersection of mountains just outside, letting that close back. And right there already I have what looks like it wants to be a central diamond of a rhombus twist. And that's exactly what it's going to be. So the through line is going to come through here. It's going to continue being a mountain fold all the way out to the edge. And then my diagonal pleat is going to carry on. This is the corner of my grid. So we're working right on top of the corner. Believe it or not, none of our twists is actually going to hit the edge of the paper. So we're fitting 49 twists onto this grid with 24 grid divisions, and not even using that outermost division on all sides. Okay, so we got this rhombus in place, and again, that's a stand-in for part of this hexagon that would be on this other side if we repeat with maximum symmetry. And like the last 2 days, you don't have to repeat with maximum symmetry. You can also repeat using this rhombus, and both of those options are in the Advent of Tess 2024 crease pattern ebook. So then flipping over, now it's a problem that I had that other pleat folded on top of the triangle wrap, because now I want to fold that triangle, but I can't because this other pleat is in the way. So what I'm going to do is open, well, first I'm going to strategize. I'm going to say, well, this is the triangle wrap that we turned into a rhombus before. I bet that triangle is the same as that triangle that we folded before. So my through line is going to be here, carrying on out, and my second diagonal direction is going to be out this way, because my first diagonal is this fold here. So if I open enough, and so you can see the three-way intersection of mountains in here, I'm going to let that be even more emphasized. I'm going to let that mountain carry through all the way to the edge of the paper. I'm going to emphasize the through line of my rhombus, and that diagonal that's going straight under this new triangle. And then one space out from the tip of this triangle, I'm going to split it into another three-way intersection of mountains. So we've got this capital I structure in there, or H if you're looking at it this way, but I if you're looking at it this way. And I'm going to let this pleat wrap underneath, and we're going to get that rhombus in place too. So now we can squash both the rhombus and the triangle. And once again, we're back to this situation where we have a pleat overlap under the corner of the rhombus. And once again, I'm going to open things up, look for the mountain that can run under there, one space away from this existing mountain, causing a three-way intersection of mountains for this triangle. And then the pleat coming, the mountain fold coming out from the tip of the rhombus is going to split into mountain folds in the two neighboring directions. But the one going here is only going one spacing, and that's falling into a three-way intersection of valley folds underneath. And then we can squash our new triangle twist up above and flip over and squash both of our new triangle twists that had been set up as wraps. So one of the really cool things about this pattern is that we're going to see a perfect hexagonal outline made from the edges of these border twists around our hexagons and triangles in the center. So that's really cool. And I'm going to take a break for a sip of water. And a vitamin C drop. So now we're at exactly the same point in the pattern as we were when we put in this rhombus earlier. So we've seen one repeat of this edge. I'm going to do another repeat at a similar speed, and then I'll start speeding up to finish the tutorial in less than an hour. And so I'm going to have a valley fold coming out from that closed triangle hole, hitting the pleat from the hexagon, one spacing from the edge. That's hitting at 120 degrees from the pleats coming in. And so that will be a triangle wrap. The valley's going straight through, hitting the existing valley, bouncing off to create a third valley, but there's a whole other pleat just sitting there, and that pleat is going to keep just sitting there while we fold this wrap on top of it. Now this rhombus on top is going to have its through line continuing straight through, and it's going to be set up for the closed rhombus. Now, if I was folding the pattern where this was eventually going to be a hexagon, what I would do is set it up as a compound wrap and leave it for the next ring around the center to squash the whole hexagon at once. But since we're folding it as a rhombus to avoid partial twists, I'm going to go ahead and squash the closed rhombus. And then flipping over, I'm going to start my new rhombus, unwrap that layer that got tucked in the triangle wrap, let the mountain of this triangle continue all the way out to the edge. In starting that rhombus, that is going to need a wrap between the rhombus and the triangle. So erasing those 2 grid spacings of mountain, tucking under, and laying things back on the table to squash. So this is a fully flat state. Like all of this is laid down flat. It may not look like it could be folded from a flat state, but it is entirely possible. And now we have the pleat overlap under the corner of the rhombus, which we've seen twice already. That is going to come out, and I'm going to get a 3-way intersection over here where I'm placing this mountain fold. It's a new mountain fold, 1 space from this mountain coming from the fat corner of the rhombus. And then we'll have that as a 3-way intersection of mountains. We will also have a 3-way intersection of valleys. Sitting underneath the point of the rhombus and tucking under. And then we can squash the new triangle. And flip over and squash the 2 triangles that had been left as wraps. Okay, so now we've seen this whole sequence twice. I'm going to start moving a little bit faster and using a little less pen. So I'm opening the pleat coming from the hexagon, which is the second of the set of parallel pleats, popping it down so a valley can pass through and wrap around, popping it down 1 spacing from the corner of the hexagon so the valley can pass through and wrap, and setting up the closed rhombus twist here in the corner. And for reference, the actual corner of the hexagon is sitting directly under the pointy corner of the rhombus. And then flipping over, I'm going to unravel the pleat that's around the triangle wrap, which is this 3-way intersection. Start setting up the next rhombus and wrap between the rhombus and the triangle that I had just set up. And squash. So like I said at the beginning, this is the pattern in Advent of Tess this year with the most wraps. Like everything going forward will have more complicated twists, but less wraps. And then we're opening up the overlap under the corner of the rhombus and setting up a 3-way intersection of mountains and a wrap between that 3-way intersection of mountains and the rhombus. And flipping over, we have 2 triangles to squash. and repeat. So first I'm going to pop down one spacing from the corner of the hexagon to set up a triangle wrap that is stabilizing a corner of my new closed rhombus twist. And then flipping over, I'm going to uncover that three-way intersection of mountains and find my new rhombus twist inside and wrap on screen. So I'll go back. Not sure how long I was off screen, but I'll go back to here. So this is where I flip the paper over, and I'll pop that open, extending this mountain fold all the way out. I'll set up my new rhombus, and it looks like I have a few extra folds in here. That is from my method for setting up the 24 divisions on the grid. So if you see that on one of your rhombi, you haven't messed up. It's just an extra feature of the grid. And then this wrap is going to have these parallel mountains one grid spacing away from each other. We can lay that down. And fully press to squash. So yeah, I can see more clearly now the intersection of diagonals for the 24 grid divisions is right in that rhombus. Not usually something to be concerned about, and actually it's not something to be concerned about, but it's not usually something that comes up, but with this grid this density of twists, it was bound to show up in some twist or another. And opening up the overlap over here, I'm getting my triangle and then splitting the pleat from the rhombus to go down into the wrap under the tip of the rhombus and flipping over. I've got 1, 2 triangles, and I'm down to the last set of parallel pleats. So from here, I'm going to set up my rhombus. So this should be exactly the same as we've already been doing until the very end, where there will be an additional step or so. Got that rhombus in place. I left the pleat from the triangle wrap folded as I put a new triangle wrap through it. Flipping over, I'm going to unwrap the layer from on top of my triangle wrap, setting up my new rhombus. I'm going to wrap under the triangle. And now one of the things that I notice is instead of there being one pleat overlap under the tip of this rhombus, there are 2, because I have 2 pleats in here. So now when I open this up, let's focus on just the pleat that we usually work on first, leaving the second one folded. If I find my triangle here and my wrap underneath, I still have problems because if I go to squash this, I have extra layers on the inside. So what do we do when we have a triangle that has extra layers on the inside? Well, we do a compound wrap. And that compound wrap is going to have a valley going out through there. So we're going to pop that valley down, and the mountain is going to continue one space away from that valley. Wrap underneath. So we've got a triangle wrap on this side of our new triangle twist and a compound wrap on the other side, which makes sense because what we do at the corner, at all 6 corners of this pattern, is a rhombus twist. So then flipping over, my layers are kind of laying down on top of each other this way. And it's not going to matter what order I squash these other than layers being under what I'm squashing. So I'll go ahead and start with this rhombus, popping this corner out to set up my closed rhombus twist and squash. And then the 2 triangles that we're used to from each edge. Okay, so that is about as high density of folding as you can get in one of these 24 division grids. And it's the highest density that we'll see for the whole Advent of Tess. So if you'd like to see how the crease pattern comes together with more repeats, definitely check out the Advent of Tess ebook at gatheringfolds.com. There's 2 different versions of how to repeat this pattern. And then definitely ask questions on my Discord server or anywhere else. Email, Instagram, Facebook, I check them all. But Discord is where the most other people can see and respond faster. And then when you're done, when you finally achieved mastery over, or at least achieved completion with this pattern, don't forget to tag me at Gathering Folds and use hashtag Advent of Tess or Advent of Tess 24 to share it with as many people as possible, and like make sure that the people who want to see the Advent of Tess patterns can see it. So happy folding, everyone. Tomorrow is going to be much simpler in terms of the structure, but it's going to use a hybrid hexagon twist, but just one. So happy folding, everyone, and see you in tomorrow's tutorial.